Hi, everybody, and welcome back from your lunch break. I hope you feel as excited and invigorated by that student conversation as I do, and that you had a chance to grab a little bit to eat, bringing it with you because we know 20 minutes wasn't a whole lot of time stretching your legs. And we are looking forward to talking about this next portion of our event, which will be about 4 faculty panels that centered around different areas of anti-racist pedagogy. So before we move into those, we wanted to give you, Eileen and I, wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of where these conversations came from. You should be seeing a slide. For me, it's blank, Eileen. I'm not quite sure why. So, these PowerPoints go in a moment, hopefully, but we're going to start with the story. So you might have seen this flyer that went around at the beginning of last semester. It's been shared in various places. And so I wanted to tell you the way that this whole series, this reflecting on anti-racist pedagogy series happened. So the idea was sparked last summer. Like many of you, I was, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Sam Osina. I'm the Associate Director of the Merit Writing Program, and Eileen Campfield and I were the co-facilitators of this pedagogy group. So this idea came last summer. Like many of you, I was watching and participating in protests after the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. And there were all these conversations that were happening both online and in my friendship circles. And I was engaging in a lot of the personal development around anti-racist practices. And thinking about how this might impact what we do as educators and what I do as an administrator. And so simultaneously, what was happening at the same time as this is that we were all, this will be familiar to you all who are teaching, is we were building that infrastructure for supporting of remote teaching. And I was struggling with a few things. So first there was the immediate of like, how do we get our classes online? And, like there was people's various states of readiness for that. And then the second was that urgent need that I felt in my own body to respond to what was happening in the world and to begin integrating some of these practices more thoughtfully into my work and into what's happening in our classrooms. So, and then part of that was about how to merge these two. So for example, like people were already feeling overwhelmed about shifting online and how to do this without adding to people's feelings of being overwhelmed and being aware of the cognitive load and the stress load of our faculty. So, it was in that moment of crisis that I reached out to Eileen Campfield through her role in the Center for Engaged Teaching and Learning. And one of the things that came out of that initial conversation, at least for me, was this like thinking about how engaging in anti-racist pedagogy was a transformative process. It's really funny that Provost Greg Campfield brought up that transformation process because it was something that I was thinking about as I was reflecting on how to introduce this. And that idea of transformation is something that does take time for people to take stock of their practices, consider changes, and make those changes. And so what we wanted to do was support an instructor-motivated effort toward this ends without adding extra to what was already a stressful time. And so what was originally thought up as a single sort of one-off event that might have been at the start of the semester, it evolved into this cross-campus interdisciplinary initiative where we met monthly throughout an entire academic year. And so before we tell you more about what that looked like, we wanted to start first with some of our definitions. And so we'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Maria, for saving us with the tech here. The place perhaps to start is to just make the distinction between anti-racist teaching and anti-racist pedagogy. And so these were the working definitions that we used this year, so that anti-racist teaching is specific course content that explicitly supports the instruction on the history and continuation of racism, as it intersects with white dominance and privilege. And so it might involve reading a text like those pictured on the left of the slide. Whereas anti-racist pedagogy we thought of as more general. These were the teaching methods that could be employed by instructors regardless of discipline or course content that disrupt the traditional pedagogical practices that reinforce structural racism. And we were careful to make the distinction that anti-racist pedagogy is not just good pedagogy or inclusive pedagogy, but it also provides students with the skills that are necessary to disrupt racism when they inevitably encounter it. So again, some definitional distinction. And then the next slide, please.
So one of the things that we wanted to bring up is this reminder, this is in all of the EDI trainings and programs on this campus, the reminder that the work of equity, diversity, inclusion is a journey and not a destination. And that was definitely one of the kind of founding ideas that we had as we worked throughout the semester. I wanted to remind you all that we're all doing that again here today. And then there's this image here about experts and expertise. And we wanted to bring up this idea of experts for a few reasons. So first, we wanted to just acknowledge and draw attention to the performative nature of expertise, especially in academia. That's part of a colonial, patriarchal, hierarchical practice that's propagated as a part of and in the fabric of what we do, right? And so it's that thing that says that the only voice that gets to say anything on a topic is the voice of an expert. And that often, not always, that is used as a way to make people feel silenced. And we're big believers that knowledge is a co-created act. So to be clear, I want to make sure I'm not downplaying expertise of others, because I know many people have been doing this work on campus, outside of it for years, and we are not the first, not the only. But it's also just to acknowledge that, even though this is happening, that this can be a barrier for some people's learning. And we didn't want that barrier to exist for our participants. So when we thought about having these workshops, we wanted our voices, Eileen and I's voices, to be part of that learning process. And we're hoping that we can all position ourselves as co-learners in this space for the next couple hours. And then the third is just in the spirit of this showcase. Again, when we think about the nature of academic conferences, they work in that similar patriarchal manner that I was mentioning, like implying that those who are presenting must be in some way experts in a field. And we wanted to subvert that. And so for us, what's happening in these panels is this is a showcasing of efforts, even small ones, some small, some bigger, and they are ways of signaling change and hopefully encouraging others to start engaging in more anti-racist practices now, right? That you don't have to be an expert to start doing some of these types of things. So next slide.
Right. So just a little bit more about the process of this whole year. When Sam first approached me, we were so cognizant of this cognitive load that the instructors were carrying due to everything that was happening in the world last August. We started out by just generating this list of questions that could prompt reflection and course redesign. And the list grew on and on and on. And I shared the link here for those who might be interested to see how we kind of framed our conversations. We didn't have a text that was the expert document or book that we looked at. But it turns out using questions was really fortuitous. It allowed instructors to draw out what was already in them, their values about teaching and learning, and then contextualize those as anti-racist pedagogy. And moreover, it allowed room for powerful discussions and really authentic vulnerability. And what really struck me after this year of work together is the extent to which anti-racist pedagogy is relational work. Not only do we have to see students as whole people worthy of our support, but instructors need to build connections with each other across disciplines, transcending ranks, across all kinds of barriers. So that's really been the core work of this learning community, and we're really excited to give you a glimpse in to the kinds of dialogue we've been having. So on to our agenda for the afternoon. Sam, next slide.
Yeah. So this is what you can expect for the rest of the afternoon. We're going to have these 4 panels. They'll be about 30 minutes each. We wanted to be mindful of your own cognitive loads here at the end of this semester. There'll be 15 minutes of instructors sharing their materials, and then 15 minutes of a Q&A to allow for discussion. And so with that, and then at the end of this, the closing conversation, there'll be about 20 minutes at the very end for all of us to come back together and share any final closing thoughts. So with that, I believe we are ready for our first panel on learning invitations.